Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new video. This is a Wolf Ambition AHW 53 and the 53 stands for 53 centimeter cut. It has an 80 litre bag and it has a 3.4 horsepower Briggs & Stratton engine overhead valve. So this actually belongs to my friend and he tells me that he hit a post and, well, I believe the original blade was totally dented or maybe even bent, but he did put a new blade on, but it still vibrates. So we're going to have to look into why it's vibrating. Most likely the crankshaft has been bent a bit. I have actually already run this mower and yeah, I could feel that the vibration was more than normal, but it wasn't terrible. So I don't know, maybe there's another reason. We'll have a look into it. We'll see the blade which was put on in replacement and we'll see if that could be a contributing factor. Now, I am also going to be giving this a service, but it's probably still worth checking the oil. It looks relatively clean. And there is the right amount in there. In fact, if anything, it's overfilled. Which would explain actually why it smoked when I first saw this run. I'm going to start it in a second, we'll see if it smokes again. Because when he demonstrated it in front of me, it billowed out with smoke. I just assumed it was because it had been transported. Delightful weather out there. Okay, yeah, so there is excessive vibration, not horrific, there's no kickback, so it just needs to be, well, it probably does need a new crankshaft or the crankshaft straightening, but then these crankshafts are so readily available used that you might as well just stick a used one in. Actually, I do have a new one, so I might even put that in. But let's have a look at the blade. So we are up in the air, let's have a look under here. Take the spark plug cap off. Okay, so let's turn this blade over. Alright, so that's there, and that one is there. So I'm just checking against a mark on the side of the deck, and it looks like, actually, well, it does look pretty level. It looks level. Okay, it could be the blade. Put it on the blade balancer, and it looks absolutely fine. It's really not even that old, you can see the original paint there. Yeah, so we are going to have to look at this crankshaft. Well, as you can see by that, yeah, we definitely do have a bent crankshaft. It's amazing that the blade was sitting so level when I turned it and then use a reference point on the deck. It just seemed good. And that's why you have to delve deeper into these things to really discover what the true issue is. But yeah, as initially expected, it is the crank. So we're going to have to remove the engine and, well, take it out of there, put a new one in. just given the engine a quick rinse just to remove some of the initial dust, but it will be thoroughly cleaned once it's been disassembled. So what we need to do is remove the carburetor, the air filter cover, the fuel tank. Obviously after that we'll be moving on to the recoil cover, and then we can work our way down, removing the flywheel and that sort of stuff. And then we can take the sump off, and well, after that obviously we'll try and get the crankshaft out of there. It's annoying because, yeah, to get the crankshaft out, obviously that is sort of the heart of the engine, right in the middle, and everything is sort of built from it, so we have to remove everything. Anyway, yes, let's just go from this side here. As I'm going to be servicing this engine, I will of course change the air filter as well. It doesn't actually look terrible. It's not amazing, but I've seen so much worse than that. Sometimes they're actually disintegrating. Of course that will be all cleaned as well in there. It is going to be a full, thorough service and repair. So next we have 3 bolts which hold this on. It's a great opportunity to clean everything thoroughly because everything is just coated in, I think it's mostly just dirt, mould and a bit of oil. As we don't have any issues with the actual running of the machine, like the carburetor, we're going to keep the fuel tank attached. We don't want to detach the fuel line. So I'm going to remove all of these bolts on the top. Got the 2 here, there's 1 back here. We can take the whole thing off. It's interesting, this plate is actually out of alignment. That should be tucked up underneath there. I actually think what's happened is somebody's had the recoil cover off and not put it back on properly. Okay. Right, so I think we're now ready to turn this around. Yep, we will take off the dipstick tube and the recoil cover. And the muffler will be coming off too. Don't know, it seems it's a bit cross-threaded, both of them. This recoil cover has definitely been off before. We'll remove the brake. This is the kill wire just here. Okay, so you can actually use a flywheel puller, or you can use the screwdriver and the mallet method. For these small ones like this, I do tend to use the mallet because it can work fine as long as you do it properly. You won't actually damage anything. But of course, yeah, if you're struggling or if you are not convinced that you're going to be able to do this without damaging it, definitely use the puller. For some bizarre reason, my microphone decided not to record any audio for the next 40 seconds, but as you can see, it's fairly self-explanatory, just removing the muffler, and then once the muffler has been removed, I move on to the cylinder head, and once that has been zapped off, I can then inspect the bore. The cylinder head actually isn't too bad, there's not too much carbon build-up, and that will clean up very nicely with the sandblaster. The bore, on the other hand, is a little bit scratched and scored. Very, very common for this type of engine though. It doesn't have a cast iron sleeve, but it's not too significant, so it should be fine. Right, so let's get this sump tapped off. The oil seal here will be replaced. Always a good measure to do that. You've got to break the gasket. Okay, so yeah, pretty well trained. You can see some very, very fine aluminium filings. If I don't know the history of this machine, so it might have never had an oil change. So that could have just been from when it was all wearing in initially from the factory. But yeah, nothing to be concerned about at this stage. Obviously, when we detach the connecting rod, we're going to see if there's any scoring on that. But anyway, yeah, first of all, we have the oil slinger and governor here. So that regulates the engine speed and also lubricates the engine. Yeah, there is a bit of grey filings on everything. It's very, very fine. It's not like when you open it up and it's like glitter. That's terrible. Anyway, yeah, this will be timed. And we have the timing marks here. So as you can see, we've got a notch just there in the plastic camshaft. And there is a dot on the metal gear on the crankshaft. And yes, if you actually align those, it makes it so much easier to remove the camshaft because it means that the valves are in the closed position. And also when you remove this, the valve tappets might fall out. So I'm just going to remove those with care. I'm not going to mix them up. So that's the exhaust tappet removed. And the intake, just put a quick marking on both of those to show intake and exhaust, so they won't get mixed up. Right, now we'll just get that bit of oil out of there. Okay, and then we have the connecting rod here to detach from the crankshaft, then the crankshaft will slide out of there. Okay. Yeah, that looks good. So let's remove the piston. Well, at least slide it up. We might not need to fully remove it, we'll see. It'll give me the opportunity to fully inspect that as well. And then we can slide the shaft out. The very bent shaft. So there we have it. You can see how bent it is. It's really bent. Wow. Just to really show you this even more, if I put this straight edge against it, you can see very, very clearly how it's bending out that way. So let's get the new crankshaft. Put this next to it. There is a bit of surface rust on it actually. It's been in storage in a dry place, but yeah, we'll just use some very, very fine sandpaper to clean it up. So there we go. Old and new. Yeah, you can probably bend that back if you really wanted to, but for me, I just want to do a really thorough job, just stick a new shaft in it. Right, so we have the gasket kit, part number 590508. And as you can see, we've got everything that we need in here, including the oil seals. So this is the top one for the crankshaft, this is the bottom one. We'll get those fitted first of all. Head gaskets, obviously we'll have to make sure we use the correct one. Sump gasket, that's going to be needed. We don't actually need the valve cover gaskets. We'll need the intake one, that sort of thing. So we'll just use whatever we need, and whatever I don't need I can just keep for another engine. So first things first, let's remove this top oil seal. They can be a little stubborn. And we'll put the new one in. Give it a quick clean in there first. And now the sump. This is a very stubborn one. You do have to watch your eyes. Finally, we have some movement. Good. Yeah, that was stubborn. Right, so we have the lovely new crankshaft. So we're going to have to lubricate the seal and the bearing in here. Well, it's a plain bearing, but yeah, it wants to be lubricated. To do this, I am using the Permatex Ultra Slick Engine Assembly Lube, which does look like jam, like seedless raspberry or strawberry jam. Yeah, so we'll get that applied in there. We'll put a bit on the crankshaft as well. It doesn't need to be swimming. Well, I sort of did apply quite a bit there actually. Okay, the crank journal is swimming. It's swimming in the assembly lube. Right, so that just slides into there. There we go. And then the piston and the connecting rod can be installed. Making sure the crank journal is at the bottom so we don't smash into it. There was a lot of carbon buildup on the top of that piston head. I've tried to clean it as much as I can. I used a wire wheel, and I did try and scratch off the really, really ingrained carbon. But yeah, it still doesn't look amazing, but at least there's nothing on it which is going to actually flake off and scratch the bore. I think that must be where the scratching has already come from, bits of carbon that have broken off. So we just need to make sure we don't have any gaps in these rings aligned with each other. So they're all fairly evenly distributed. That's good. And we have the notch which goes to the top. So we'll put the piston ring compressor onto that and we'll install it. And we'll torque them to 11 Newton meters. Perfect. Right, now for the camshaft, the tappets and the governor. which is also the oil slinger. And finally we have the oil slinger, which is the governor as well. Okay, then we have the gasket, which I have applied high tack to. That's Permatex high tack. Gasket sealant. So we'll put an application on this side as well, and then we can put the sump on. And the sump bolts want to be 11 Newton meters. The torque. As always, I'm sandblasting the cylinder head. Unfortunately, my GoPro is currently not working, so I couldn't actually put the camera into the sandblasting cabinet, but you can see the before and after. New head gasket. And the head. All sandblasted. Right, so that's all the internal components reassembled. We're now ready to build up the exterior of the engine. We've got the flywheel that goes here. So I'm just going to get all that done. Obviously, it's just the reverse of the disassembly, as you would expect. And then we can start thinking about putting it back onto the mower. So the original key for the flywheel has partially sheared. So we have a new one. You can see the difference between the new one and the used one on the right. Obviously, that's partially sheared when the impact occurred with the block of wood. So we'll get the flywheel fitted with the new key, and of course we didn't remove the coil, so that is still there, and it will contact it a little bit while fitting, but yeah, the gap should be the same, but I will check it. The cup and the nut, just zap it on. This is the 10,000ths of an inch feeler gauge. Just checking the gap there. Yep, that's perfect. Good. Okay then. So we can now continue to build up the engine. Need to put the muffler on and the carburetor and all that sort of stuff. Next we have a new genuine filter. You can see that one is quite old, but it's not terrible. It's ready for replacement though. So that just goes into there. And then we can slot that onto the housing. I've cleaned that housing as well. Good. And then we just have the top cover, which I still need to clean. But we're getting there. It's looking a bit shinier. Of course, it's not all about the looks though. So we now have the spark plug. Put a new spark plug into there. The old one I just kept in place for the sandblasting of the head because it just prevents the grit from getting into the thread in the head. So we'll put the new one in. It's the NGK B2LM. And there we have it, the new shaft is fitted and the engine is finished. So that can now be refitted to the mower, and obviously we're going to have to put the oil in. We'll make sure everything else is good on the machine as well. Giving it a good clean. Obviously I can't go too aggressively at this because the paint is bubbling up underneath. If I was to pressure wash it, it would just all fly off and then it would look terrible. It'd be rusty. So let's refit the engine. The engine mounted. As for the belt, I've checked it, it looks to be in good condition, so that doesn't need to be replaced. And I'm just going to sharpen the blade. We'll give it a quick clean up and then we can put a good edge on it, make a nice clean cut. Yeah, this blade is relatively new, as mentioned already, but it's still hit a few stones, maybe wood. So yeah, we're going to have to grind that flat first and then put the edge on. But there's not too much build up on it. I know most people won't do this. I'm just cleaning out in these holes just to remove any extra weight which could influence the result when I come to balance the blade. But really, yeah, the bit of dirt which is in these holes is insignificant. Okay, so we'll take that flat and then we'll put the edge on. Okay, so that is on the blade balancer and it is looking very good. That is balanced. So we'll get the blade fitted along with the pulley. and the blade. So I'm going to obviously reuse the old blade boss. It does have signs of wear after the incident, but yeah, I've determined that it is still perfectly usable. Although I think if this mower hits another block of wood or something similar, yeah, that's going to be the end of this boss, so it will need to be replaced after that. And there we have it, that's the underside done. So now we can upright it, we'll put the oil in and the petrol, reconnect the brake cable, and we'll give it a go. Perfect. Put some fuel in and we'll give it a go. Just giving the bag a clean as well, the collector, so we'll put that back on, and I think we're going to mow some grass.